So the lesson that I've had today for you today is the Fool and the Desperado. So you might be wondering, why isn't Joe preaching today? Well, interesting enough, we're going to have a leaders meeting afterwards at 1 p.m. and Joe is actually going to be preaching on careers, and our great brother James is going to be preaching on being a great student. So that will be very, very fun to stay back behind and listen to. But I've got a card for you today. This is called a picture card. A picture card, as you can see, it's just the king. Yeah? And any picture that you got in the deck of cards, they're called pictures. So before I was a preacher, I was actually a card dealer, at the Star Casino, and it was fun. Whenever I saw the boards that would tell me where to go, which pit to go, so I can deal cards, it was either blackjack or baccarat. And for those that you don't understand what baccarat is one of the best games for the best odds. So, but, you might be walking into the casino and you might be feeling like, I'll just go for blackjack or, roulette, because these are the games that I understand, I know, right? Unless you're, someone that's a regular, you go in there and, I'm going to be winning some big money today. So you go in and you sit in, those pits. And I'm sitting there, I'm dealing these baccarat cards to people. And, the Chinese come along. And it's fun, it's very, very entertaining and dramatic to deal as well as watch baccarat, because, I kid you not, the Chinese, they love playing this game so much, they almost believe that they can change the cards. When you want a card like this, you yell, "Picture!" Picture. But if you don't yell loud enough, you might be like, a picture! Dang, it's 9. But it's so dramatic and fun because, a Chinese man will be sitting there and playing, and then his friends come along, because it's not just an individual game, it's a team game, okay? So everyone's just crowding around, they're behind you, and, they're all yelling the same thing. Picture! And it's like crazy because, you look at that and you're like, do these people actually believe that? Do they actually believe that the louder they yell, they're actually going to get a picture card? But some of us, are Christians, and sometimes we don't yell loud enough to God to believe that our prayers are going to get answered. So I've got a lesson for you guys today. It's called The Fool and the Desperado.
Come on, buddy.
So Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 15, it says, "Someone in the crowd said to him," Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." You can imagine the crowds that were just lining up to listen to Jesus' words here. And Jesus is talking about values. He's talking about putting God first. He's about, spiritual possessions, spiritual wealth, not just, possessions and wealth. And this man, he comes up and the message just completely flies across his head. And he's like, "Teacher, help me with my family issues." But, Jesus, he's just like, you know what? Why do I have to be the one that deals with your family issues? Why do I have to be the one that's trying to be the judge? Not that Jesus is not trying to be a righteous judge, which he is, but there are more important matters at hand. I feel like sometimes, in our relationships, there are so many heart issues that stop us from having good relationships with our family members. In the church, outside the church, in our co-workers. Greed is a number one of the biggest problems in life today. It stops us from having great relationships. It stops us from wanting to really give our hearts to people. We tend to believe that the more money that we pour into problems, the more they're going to be solved. You know, the view that money solves all problems fuels a destructive world behavior, a world-like human behavior. And this man's view of life was just, it just consists of just an abundance of possessions. But life is more than just possessions. Life is full of joy of the Holy Spirit. Life is full of happiness and good relationships. I think about selfishness as well. Selfishness oftentimes, make us not desperate enough to run towards God enough for help. And we want actually God to do our will instead of allowing our hearts to change so that we can do God's will. Oftentimes we would rather be comfortable living on our own and our own self-sufficiency with no care of what happens outside. It's often selfishness that stops us having good relationships with other people. I can remember a time when I was at Macau, and in a casino. And, I loved gambling when I was a non-Christian. And I would go and sit at those baccarat tables, and I will be on a winning streak, which is fantastic. I almost won basically my tickets worth to Macau. And I was like, that's awesome. But I believed that I could earn double the amounts. And as a result, I lost everything. Greed fuels a lot of our destructive behaviors. More money, more problems. That's my first point for you today. Luke 12, verse 13 to 21 says, and he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many, many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. See, Jesus, he begins with this parable and he's like, you know what? I'm going to tell you a parable so that I can help you with your heart issue. Not that I don't have an issue with your family issue. Maybe you are not getting your inheritance. Maybe you've got a greedy brother or something like that. But, he's trying to, he tells this parable and he's like, this man has everything. He's got his PR, he's got the Australian dream, he's got his business, the startup, whatever. And, he's living life at large according to the world. His retirement was very, very close. And he's like, you know what, I've worked so hard for this retirement of mine that I'm ready to just chill out. I'm just ready to chill out. But when he thought he could finally enjoy the life that he really wanted, that he reached this significant milestone in his life, God decided to take his life away. In one night, all the man's accomplishments, his major achievements, it was just all gone. It was just all gone because he could not control the life and the destiny that, he was living for, which was eternal punishment. The man was a fool, not because he was rich, but because he lived without any awareness of preparation for eternity. Where would you see yourself before God over eternity? Money does not take away your problems, they add to it. You can imagine just trying to fill up a bathtub full of water, right? And you're trying to fill it up with buckets of water, buckets of water, buckets of water. But if you don't fill the bathtub with a plug at the very bottom, you can throw as much water into the plug, but it's still going to drain out. Yeah. In the same way, money is not the answer to our problems. Sometimes insight and knowledge is. Sometimes wisdom is. I remember trying to move one of my massive washing machines for the very first time in the brother's household. And you can imagine just trying to, do that for the very first time, trying to move a brother's household, right? And, you're trying to move it. And at that time, I didn't know that righty, if you turn it right, that's actually to tighten it. But if you turn it left, you're actually loosening it. So I'm like, all right, you know what? Turn it all left and turn it really, really tight as well. It's good. I pull out the plug at the back and all the water in the world just keeps pouring out and pouring out and pouring out. And, it's right next to the kitchen as well. And it's just flooding the kitchen. And I'm like, oh my goodness me, what do I do? Just a moment of lacking of knowledge, a moment of just no insight, completely turned disastrous. And I think about that, and, at the moment I was like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And I see a hammer. I'm like, I need that hammer. I grab the hammer. I start smacking it the other way because I turned it so tight that eventually it actually loosened up and I was able to tighten it. So amen to that. But, money is something that we use to acquire knowledge, to acquire, insight. Sometimes you need money to, money is just not the tool to the problems, but it's actually something to lead to the problem, something to lead to the right tool. Knowledge and insight comes from the Bible. Psalms 119 says, your commands are always with me and make me wiser than my enemies. I have more insight than all my teachers, for I meditate on your statutes. The Bible also gives vision. Jeremiah 29 verse 11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Imagine not having the vision for the kind of future that holds for you. It's amazing because, at the beginning of the week, I was able to scroll through Facebook and realize that in the church, we're connected to so many different churches around the world, that we had the very, very first blind evangelist ever being appointed. Wow. Which is really, really amazing. You can imagine just, even that this guy doesn't have vision, he was still able to envision the life that God has for him because he understood what God wanted him to do. Yeah. The more money you make, the more money you spend. I think this is a very, very relatable, point. This is called the lifestyle creep. Have you ever had a salary increase and you're like, you know what, I'm going to deal with my debt, by having a salary increase? What happens after that? Well, you get a bigger debt on your credit card because you haven't dealt with your discipline in able to deal with your debt. Sometimes, I think about, okay, what the difference is between a mosquito as well as a credit card. Sometimes they're very, very common. Well, there's so many commonalities because, they numb the pain discreetly, and before you feel the pain, you're in pain. In the same way, credit cards, they can get you like that. It's the credit card scheme, Satan's scheme. You know what? Get now, pay later. Get now, pay later. And as a result, you get into more debt and more debt and more debt because you didn't have enough discipline to deal with your debt. It's the same thing with faith as well. When you have faith, when you don't have faith and you don't work on your faith, you can't expect your faith to get stronger and stronger. You've got to work on your faith. Sin is discreet and it's pleasurable as well. You can get into a whole lot of problems just by getting into sin because you're not disciplined enough to tell yourself to stop. I think about sin that is buried in our hearts as well. The sin that's buried in our hearts is so deep, it's so deep. It's like going to the beach and then coming home and realizing that you've got more sand in your underpants than you expected. Sometimes that's with our hearts as well. The more we dig into our hearts, the more we realize that there's just so much sin that's coming out. We've got to read the Bible all the time because if we don't do that, we don't see how our sin hurts God. I think you don't know who your true friends are as well when you have more and more and more money. There's a B.I.G. notorious song, More Money, More Problems. And the chorus says, I don't know what they want from me. It's like the more money we come across, the more problems we see. If you really want to know who your true friends are, become a Christian. Because you'll know very, very quickly who your friends are that really want to support you. Point 2, more God, more problems. Matthew chapter 17, verse 14 to 20, it says, when they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." "You unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Jesus rebuked the demon, and he came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "Because you have so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." You know, why was this man just completely desperate? You know, it's because he was bringing his boy who was suffering from some sort of mental illness to Jesus. And you can imagine that all the crowds that were just stopping him from actually bringing him to Jesus. You know, you can imagine all the disciples that he's bringing it to. He's like, you know, "Can you help me with this, Paul or Peter? Can you help me with this one? Can you help me with this one?" And it just got to a point where he's like, I need to bring it to Jesus. Like, none of his disciples can help me with that. None of the crowd is encouraging me or supporting me to get him to Jesus as well. You know, this man was so desperate, he was like calling Jesus to have mercy on his son. You know, this boy's illness was so severe that it caused him to wreak havoc on himself. Destruction. You know, he was throwing himself into so many painful environments that, you know, had caused him to have harm on his body. You know, throwing himself into, you know, different situations like would cause him to just drown or cause him to hurt himself. You know, I think about that, and I think how, you know, sometimes as disciples as well as non-disciples, we can throw ourselves into like dangerous environments as well. We can throw ourselves into careers, we can throw ourselves into jobs without the right heart, without the right motive, without not putting God first in our life, and, you know, have that harm us because we're not, that's all the energy is taking us away from really, really serving God and really, really loving God. You know, I think how, you know, it's not just jobs and careers, but it could be relationships as well. I think about, you know, the kind of pain that's caused me when, you know, I've been smoking or when I was taking lots and lots of drugs. I used to like to party and go to raves. That was who I was before. And when I used to do that, I would take 1, 2, 3, because I was like, you know what, I'll try to be modest here, you know. There's all these friends of mine, they want to take lots and lots and lots, but I'll try to be modest. And then after like a rave or an event that I go to, you know, it's always the next few days where I read a tabloid on Facebook or something like that, and I hear about how there's just always one person that just passes away, that dies from the same event that I had gone to previously before. And it's because they've had a dud, like something that was like a false pill or something like that. And they take it, and it's not like they're trying to, you know, put too much pressure on themselves, but they just take one, and as a result of that dud, that takes their life away. You know, sometimes I think just how lucky I am after surviving all of that. That could have been me. That could have been me after throwing myself into all these different scenarios before I was a Christian, and then realizing how lucky I am to be in the church and saved now. You know, the desperation that you have should always draw yourself closer to God. You know, after realizing that Jesus' disciples had no power to help him, he had to throw his issues to Jesus. You know, how hard do you fight to bring problems to Jesus? You know, I want to lift up one of my brothers in the East, Roger. You know, Roger's a Chinese Christian and he's studying at University of New South Wales. And, you know, if you're going to be preaching something for midweek during Brothers' Nights, it's probably going to be shared if it's a great one, you know. So, you know, last year we have, you know, our special missions, you know, goal, right? And for a lot of us, we were running marathons. And we were running marathons, and I was like, Roger, you know what? You can run the marathon. I really, really believe that you can run this marathon. And he's like, sure, you know, I'll go for it. So he runs the marathon, and then we sit down, and I'm like, okay, well, you've got to also now raise some money for special now. And he's like, oh, I didn't know that we had to run special. I didn't know that we had to raise special for, planning churches and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, you know what? Well, now you know. And so he's like, you know what? The running was super easy for me, but this was really, really hard for me. And so I was trying to give him lots and lots of tips. Hey, maybe you can sell this. Maybe you can sell that. Maybe you can sell this. And he's like, okay, I'll sell my bike. And he sells his bike, and he actually gets, a lot more than he actually paid for it. And he's like, that's pretty awesome. I'll give that to special. And then afterwards, you know what? You're still short a little bit from your goal. Why don't you sell, your Gundams? And if you didn't know what Gundams are, they're like these figurines that Roger really, really loves. And they're like these toy figurines that cost a couple of $100. I'm like, you know what? Why don't you sell those ones as well? And he's like, oh no, please not. I do not want to sell this one. So he goes to Jesus and he's like, Jesus, please, I don't want to sell my Gundams. Please don't let me sell my Gundams. And, and he starts looking for jobs, looking for more solutions on, how he can actually raise it. And by that time, he was able to, find a job in tutoring a boy. And, and he was able to earn so much more than, he was ever expecting as a tutor. And, lo and behold, he was able to make special missions by that, by that job. And that person even became a Christian as well. Wow. Sometimes we've got to have a desperation about ourselves. We've got to have a desperation to go to Jesus and be like, Jesus, please, please help me with this solution. We've got to be like the Chinese at the gaming table. We've got to be like, picture to God. I think about the mountains that, I've had to personally overcome as well in my life. The mountains of, discipline, the mountains of studies. I'm very, very grateful to be able to, to listen to James's, studies, sermon for later on. And, when I was going through that, I was thinking I've been a terrible student. The reason why I came back to uni was because I flunked out for it the first time. So I decided to go back there. And, I was still struggling a little bit with my, weighted average mark. But ever since I became a Christian, I became more disciplined. I became, I woke up a lot earlier. And as a result, I was able to actually go to my 9 a.m. classes because I was having my quiet times in the early morning. So I went there, I actually listened, I sat at the front and I was like, teacher, I have this question. Teacher, I have this question. Being a Christian has helped me dramatically to improve my discipline as simply just a student. I think about even the mountains of purity. Before I used to go on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever, all these different social media and just browse and fall into impurity all the time. But as a result of this, a discipline of saying, you know what, I'm going to cut these different social media apps because I need it for my relationship with God. That changed dramatically, and as a result, I spent a lot more time studying and reading my Bible, praying, and just watching sermons on YouTube as well. And that helped me dramatically with my relationship with God. I think about, the overcoming just a lack of faith as well. Not going to church because I had a class on that same day. And I realized, if that had come during the time when I was studying the Bible, I probably would not have become a Christian. But thank God he allowed me to experience it after a year becoming a Christian. And I had enough faith to be like, you know what? I think I can actually put God first, even at the cost of my education. And as a result, I've been, on the mission team, going into the ministry, marrying a great wife. And it's just been great to see how God has overcome every mountain that I've been able to climb. I think about even, making my special missions as well. That has been a massive, massive mountain for me to climb. And, it gets to a point where you're just desperate. You know what? I've got to lead my region. I've got to lead my region because if I don't lead my region, how is my region going to have the faith and be inspired to also be able to believe that they can also reach their goals in special missions, So I was like praying. And, it's one of those sermons that Joe would do that, it was at the right time, at the right place, and it was on courage. And I'm like, you know what? I've got to face the mountains with courage this time. I've got to face it and be like, you know, I'm going to lead this situation in my life that I'm lacking in, and make a leap of make a bounds of make a leap of faith. And so as a result, I was like, you know what? I haven't swum for a long, long time, over 10 years. And I used to train in swimming. I used to go to state and national competitions. But I know that I haven't gone for 10 years. But if I can train just like how I ran the marathon in the last 2 years, I could probably do a swimming marathon. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a swimming marathon to raise my special missions. And the people that I've been connected with before who used to swim with me as well, they may be interested too. So I was like, you know what? Because God has helped me to overcome the mountains that I've been climbing over these years, God can help me. I've got more faith now to believe that God can help me to overcome this mountain too. Sometimes we've got to just go to God with desperation. How good are you with going to God with desperation? Or do you believe that God, you can do the mountains by yourself? Or do you believe that you have to go to God with absolutely everything in your life? I want to challenge you today. Coming in for a landing, my point is more money, more problems. You need, more God for more solutions in your life. And you've got to be like a Chinese at a baccarat table yelling, picture to God. And to God be all the glory. Amen.